Okay, so I would like to welcome you to yet another training video. And in this training video, we want to pick up from where we left off on the previous one. So currently under section 2, and we want to learn how to populate the table. Which table is that? So when you click on preview there, the table that we're talking about is the one which was under lesson development. So we want to learn how do we add information to the lesson development section of our lesson plan. So let's pull back our digital map, as we are calling it now. We go to section 2 and then we tap on lesson development. Now, when you tap on lesson development, you are going to get an interface similar to this one. So, and one more thing that I forgot to point out is just in case you want to know where exactly you are in editing your lesson plan, this part here shows you where you are. So for instance, if I change and I go to lesson outcomes, that part will also change lesson outcomes like that. So if you quickly want to know where are you in your process of adding information to your lesson plan, you can take a look at that part there. Also, you can see from the lesson overview, the one which pops up, you can tell which part you're editing by taking a look at that green dot. So the green dot will show you which section you're at. Now when you click on that section, it will show you the specific item that you're editing. Now in our case, we want to edit the lesson development. Okay, so under the lesson development section, we can think of it as follows. If you notice here, when we pull out our preview of the lesson plan, okay, so you notice that the lesson development has got the steps. It also has the lesson content. It also had the method, the teacher activity, and the pupils activity. So I want you to think of these as columns, which they are. Okay, so we've got that column, we've got that column, we've got that column, and other columns. So when we are about to edit the lesson development, we can have that in mind. We can have the columns in mind. So currently, we are editing the steps column, okay? And then we get a bit of tips on how to proceed from here. So the first tip is saying to create a new step, click on the add step button. So let's do that. Let's create a new step by clicking on the add step button, this button here. So when you click on the add step button, it will ask you for the duration. That is, how long will this step last? So the duration is normally in minutes. So I'm going to say, okay, for the first one, it will last 10 minutes. And then I can click on add step. So when I click on add step, it will create the step for me and I'll be able to see it right there. And then it says the next one is saying that the next tip, it's saying click on a step to start editing it. So this is the step. So when I click on it, have you seen this blue thing which has been placed around the step? So this blue border shows you that you are editing the first step. Okay, so let's just try to add another step so we tell the difference. So this step will last 20 minutes, and when I click on add step, we expect 2 steps to be shown like that. So these steps actually correspond to rows. Now what do I mean? When I go back to the preview section, notice what will have happened in the preview of our lesson plan. So we've seen that previously we didn't have these rows, but now we have them. So we have step number 1, which occupies for the first row, and then we have the second step, which occupies the second row. So that's how we can add additional rows to our table, which is under the lesson development. We simply add steps, and when we add those steps, it will add the rows for us, and then it's also going to show us the number of minutes that we need to spend on each of those steps. Now the question is, how do I add content to these other boxes here? Okay, because I've just added content to the first column there, but how do I add content to the next one and the next one and the next one? Well, let's find out. So let's go back to the lesson development section under section 2, then lesson development. So when we click on lesson development there, it's going to fetch our data and it's going to show us that we have 2 steps there. Now initially, when you load the lesson development, you have your steps, they'll also be loaded, but none of them will be selected. This is because at this point, the Z Lesson Planner website doesn't know which step you want to start editing. And that is where the second tip comes in. Click on a step to start editing it. So to begin editing a specific step, you have to click on it. So let's take, for instance, I want to start editing step number 1. When I click on it, it will become highlighted. This tells you that you are now editing step number 1. Now, how do I add information to the other columns? Now, this is where tip number 3 comes in. So tip number 3 is saying, click on the right arrow, which is this one here. So click on the right arrow to move to the next column. So when I tap on the right arrow there, it will tell me loading lesson content column. So now I have my lesson content column. It has been loaded like that. So for me to sort of know where I'm at right now, it's telling me in this box here that I'm editing step number 1 and the lesson content column. If I try to change the step, okay, let's try to edit step number 2, and then we go to the next column. It will also tell me that you're editing step number 2, the lesson content column. Okay, so that's basically a bit of orientation on that specific portion of the user interface. So let's go back to step number 1, the lesson content column. So let's add some content here. So I can say some content for, okay, so some content for step 1, the lesson content. Okay, so after I do that, remember, always save your work. If you don't save your work, it will not show. So when I look at, let's just try to prove that. I've been saying this a lot in our training videos, so let's just try to prove that. So I've typed some information here, but I haven't clicked on save. Okay, I've typed it, but I haven't clicked on save. So if I go to the preview, when I go to preview, that information won't be shown because I did not save it. So always remember to save your work when you make changes to it. When you make changes to it, save your work. Okay, so let me add back that information that was under lesson content. So I can add that information back, and then I click on save. So it will have saved my work, and then I can continue editing from where I've left off. So I can move on to the next column, which is the method column. Now, some institutions and some schools will not have this column. So later on in the future, an update will be made available where the teacher can decide to either add it or exclude it. Okay, so let's add that. So we're going to say some content for step 1, the method column. Okay, then I can scroll down there and I can save. So my work has been saved. I can move on to the next column just like that. And keep in mind, I can keep track of which row I'm in using that portion up there. So it's telling me I'm currently editing step number 1. So that way you won't get lost and say, which step am I editing? So it's telling you editing step number 1, the teacher's activity column. So I can also add some information there. So this is the teacher's, okay, so this is the teacher's activity, and I can save. So that information will be saved and the like. I can go to the I can go to the last section now, which is the pupil's activity, and I can add information as well to that column. And then I can return to the steps. That is, if I want to add another step or begin editing a different step. Okay, but for now, let's just preview our lesson plan so that we see what we've added so far. Okay, there we go. So that's how we can add information to the various columns of a specific row. So we can say, okay, the lesson content, that's the information there, the method, that's the information there, and the teacher's activity, that's the information there. So if you want to add the information to the second step, we can go back to the section 2, then lesson development. Then we can scroll down to the specific step that we want to edit. So in this case, so I can collapse this, I can close it there, or you can leave it there just for reference sake so you don't forget. Okay, so I can tap on step number 2, and then when that arrow appears, I can then begin to move to different columns. Now keep in mind that if you don't select a step, this arrow will not show. Now what do I mean? Let me show you. So let me just load the new page one more time. Okay, so once the page loads, you discover that the right arrow is not showing. Reason being, it doesn't know, Z lesson planner doesn't know which of these steps you want to edit. So it won't show you the arrow to move to the next column because it doesn't know which row. But when you select a step, then the arrow will show, then you can move to the next column. And then in the same way that we're adding information to step number 1, you can also add information to step number 2. Now you will notice that on each step we'll have 2 buttons. There's this first button there, and there's this red one. So we've got the yellow one and the red one. So just in case you need to change the minutes, okay, you can tap on the first yellow button, and then this will take you to the edit step, the edit step section where you can change the duration. Okay, so you can say edit step, and this will change the duration to a different one, such as that one, and this will also reflect when you preview your lesson plan. Then when you want to delete a specific step, you can tap on the delete button there, which is the red one. So it's going to ask you to confirm the deletion. So it's going to say, are you sure you want to delete step 2? And it's going to give you a notice that this will also delete the information in the other columns of this step. So just in case you added the information to step 2, the lesson content, the pupil's activity, the teacher's activity, when you delete this step, all of that information will also be deleted. So here's an example. So when I tap on delete, it says the step has been deleted and the list has been renumbered. So if I go to the preview section to preview my lesson plan, you discover that only one row will be showing like that. The other row has been deleted. So that is basically how you use the lesson development section. You add steps. When you select a step, you begin to edit the various columns under that step. So in the next training video, we will take a look at the third section, and we'll see how do we add information to the conclusion. How do we add information to the conclusion? The conclusion is this part here. So we'll learn how to populate the conclusion. So stay tuned.